Do you guys want to talk with MJ on the phone?
MJ,
Hey, MJ.
can you hear us?
MJ, did you hear any of it? Oh, it is a long delay. Oh, okay. Okay, well, at least we know that works then.
Wonderful. Hi, Joanne.
So we should be good.
All right.
There's nothing against you, lawyers too much.
Well, let's go ahead and get started then today. So Chair Nemerov is attending virtually. He'll be joining us, I assume. And due to, I think, some of the added efficiency of being able to chair in person, Chair Nemerov asked me to serve as the chair for the duration of today's meeting. So I will be serving in that function today. And so I'm pretty sure that our only agenda item for our working session tonight is to talk about our work plan. So that was in our packet. I think that the goal is just to continue reviewing the feedback that we provided last time, make sure that it's in a good spot, and then go from there. And so what I think would be helpful for me, Carrie, is if you wouldn't mind kind of kicking off with, maybe if there's been any dialogue in the city about kind of where we're at, how other people are feeling about the workload or anything that we could do to continue to tighten it up. And then maybe even kick off whatever questions you have for us.
Sure. Before I start, let's see if Joanne, can you hear us?
Our panelists, let's see. She's muted.
Joanne?
I unmute.
There we go. Can you hear us okay?
Yep, we can hear
I
you. Joanne.
can. I can't see any. Okay, good. Sorry.
The cameras are not working, so
ahead.
there's no video, so you won't be able to see us.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. That's the night that I was trying to fix that too.
Yeah, so from a staff perspective, nothing in regard to the items that we've already had in the work plan that we've looked at. I think the issue for us to discuss tonight, if there's anything we want to talk about what we have in there, we can do that too. But the Housing Task Force has provided, they did a report and study, and they have a number of recommendations that fall into the lap of the Planning Commission. So, and some of them are pretty time consuming and large undertakings. But it is within their recommendations, and what the council has asked the different commissions to do is consider their recommendations. If you feel it's worthy, put it into your work plans. And the council's gonna have to, because there are a lot of them, not just for Planning Commission, but other commissions. They're gonna have to, it's gonna be a balancing act for how many that we can complete. I see these as, it's gonna take a number of years to complete a lot of these. So, it's something for us to think about and prioritize. Stephanie Hawkinson is with us this evening. She was the staff liaison for that whole process. So if you have any questions surrounding each of them, but they do have the 8 recommendations that were included in your packet. I don't know if you want me to go through each one or if we want to just open it up for discussion.
Did everyone read the packet?
So I don't remember seeing those. Were they in the packet?
In the work session packet?
Oh.
Yeah, I
you
didn't see
read
it
the work
until
session.
they're after the minute.
Do you want to just walk through?
Sure.
I think I just looked at, yeah,
So I did the same
I don't think I saw them.
Sure.
Sorry.
So the first is to facilitate the development of new housing options such as accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units actually shows up in another part of their recommendation. So that's a pretty big one. It's something we've been talking about here on the plan. I think it might even be on the work plan for this year. We haven't gotten to it. But maybe that is one that we do want to add into the zoning ordinance recommendations. And there's so many different ways you can approach accessory dwelling units. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of layers to that.
yeah.
So that's the first one. The second is support opportunities to accommodate missing middle housing.
Mhm.
In order to do that, that could be a really large undertaking, changing zoning, allowing cluster, smaller developments within single-family neighborhoods. There's a lot of different ways to tackle that. And being we just finished the comp plan, that would be a challenging one in my eyes, but. The third is support the development of preservation of affordable housing throughout Edina. That's almost kind of seems like a community development for our department to do, maybe not so much for planning commission to tackle. Consider the fourth, consider zoning ordinance amendments to allow lot splits for infill development, single family ownership housing, detached or zero lot line. So again, there's a lot here that's considering smaller lot sizes. A lot of different ways we can go with this strategy also. The fifth is again, accessory dwelling units, mother-in-law apartments, or whatever form that may take.
How would you say that's different than the first 20?
Well, the first one, they're saying it's different in that they're suggesting several, I don't know what other new housing options they're saying, such as accessory dwelling units. Maybe Stephanie could chime in on this one.
I'm log on and find the task force report. I don't seem to remember. But it could have fallen under, they had multiple strategies. This could have fallen, one was under strategy 1 and one was under strategy 2. And so there are 4 main areas. And so it just fell under a different category. And I'd be able to show that to you if I could. Here, I'll try to.
So it's almost the idea that accessory dwelling supports 2 of the main
2 of the
initiatives, so
main
it's listed on there twice.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Let's see, strategy 6, continue to allow tear down rebuilds, but consider design guidelines. There's a lot to that one too. Probably one of the most difficult, even when you have design guidelines. Enforcing those, what do those look like? Because I can just leave it at that. Simplify the project approval process, limit discussion to, I think they're trying to streamline the development process to make things somewhat easier in some instances. I think we've got that on the work plan where we're going to talk about sketch plans and really our process as a whole. I think we've got that one covered. And really the 8th is somewhat similar, talking about the review process. So those are the 8 items. I think it would be staff's recommendation to put in the accessory dwelling unit. That's a pretty big one, but one that's been out there for us to consider for a while.
Carrie, would you mind probably repeating how these 8 items were generated? Who generated these? And they are being proposed to be submitted to the planning commission, or they're being identified as being items the planning commission would be responsible for?
Sure. Yeah, do you want to just take?
Maybe you covered it. I was kind of distracted.
That's all, whichever way you want, Harry.
Yeah, so there was a task force created by the city council to look at housing, create a housing report, housing needs assessment. And so it's the work of that group. Maybe Stephanie can fill in for how those recommendations came about.
Right, so after the comprehensive plan was approved, I think the council was trying to address the fact that there were some dissenting voices in the community regarding the housing chapter. And so they wanted to just get another task force in addition to either support what was stated in the housing chapter or come up with broader or different type of strategies. So that's what the housing task force was created. And they were supposed to come up with a comprehensive, not just affordable, but a comprehensive housing plan for the city. It was adopted, formally adopted, not just accepted by the HRA last December. And staff was charged with coming up with an implementation plan. And so we took all their strategies and staff looked at them and split them into different categories. And assigned them, like, does this fall under engineering? Does this fall under parks? Does this fall under community development and the planning commission? And what would be the secondary body that would take this strategy on? So that was presented, it was a larger report, was presented to the HRA earlier this month. And they're broken up in categories of, we're already doing this. You know, these strategies are already underway. These strategies could be added to work plans. And these are, we don't have the authority to like amend building code. And so the ones that fell into categories of these could be adopted in the work plan. The HRA approved the implementation plan and is pushing it back on city departments and the various commissions to review and incorporate into their work plans. And if not incorporating into the work plans, some explanation of why not. Why we're not proceeding with this. So that's kind of how,
At least for the year.
at least for the year. And so some of these, you know, it's challenging because you just went through this long, arduous process of creating a comprehensive plan and the housing chapter specifically as it relates to this. And then here, this is going and saying, well, we want some changes to that. And that is correct. And I apologize for that, but these came from above.
Are these in any particular order, Stephanie?
Well, there are 4 goals. And so it was goal, promote life cycle housing, amend land use regulations to enable more diverse housing stock, reduce building costs, and encourage sustainable design and technology. So those are the 4 categories. And then we reshuffled them to fit into what we're already doing, what can be put on work plans and what we can't do. So they're not in any order with regards to priority. They're more in order of where they fell into those recategorizations and whether or not they're under goal 1, 2, or 3, or 4. But there's no priority given to them.
This is probably just for my own clarification. As we were doing the comp plan, and it's now in front of the city council, and it seems like at the end, the housing chapter density became the issue that kind of threatened to blow everything up. And so it was kind of kicked down the road in the sense that, so this task force was kind of way like, here's how we'll resolve these unresolved issues. Correct? I mean, is that the kind of, and specifically for wasn't it over this very issue that the planning commission had quite a little blow up to? Was this all kind of in the same?
A little bit, somewhat, and I think,
You
I
know,
mean, I'm gonna editorialize here, which it's on YouTube, so forgive me for doing this, and I'm speaking as Stephanie and not as any official body. I think yes, I think it was in response to some of the issues that were raised when the passage of the comp plan focused on density and growth. What is ironic in this is that rather than pulling away from density, these strategies are actually asking for increasing density. So it's a little ironic.
Okay.
If I may say that.
Careful what you wish for. No, I mean, we had, yeah, without it, I think this whole issue cost us a commission member, for speaking out. I mean, it did have it kind of reverberates through the commission here. I'm just kind of like putting it all in context that this is the outcome. Okay.
Yes, this was part of that whole stuff that happened 2 years ago with the passage of the comp plan.
Because if I recall correctly, there was conversation around the density and then thought of, well, if we're proposing all of this, let's make sure we meet it based on demographics and that sort of thing, right? And that's where the housing study came from. And then what you're saying, Stephanie, is actually as a result of the housing study, not only do we need it, but we need it even more than the comprehensive plan. And for different types, more middle housing and more ADU and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, it's a balance. I mean, the task force was, of course, is a pretty dynamic group, and they weren't all in lockstep with each other by any stretch of the imagination. There was a lot of spirited conversations. And I think the idea is that there's a strong desire, as with the comp plan, to preserve as much single-family neighborhood as possible, yet to, and, you know, the multifamily being in 7% of the city, you know, as aligned with that. So they're not disrupting that. But with ADUs, I think they don't, the issue of density did not come up in the conversation of ADUs, like that they did not put together that that's an increasing of density, but more that it's mother-in-law apartments, it's au pairs, it's, you know, so it's a convenience thing, and it's being allowed in other communities. In other communities, their zoning codes are written differently, so they're allowed in R1 districts. In Edina, they're not allowed in R1 districts. In other communities, they are. So I think they saw it more like it wasn't a conflict with those previous conversations. In Missing Middle is more of a transition zone, you know, and they saw it along, and it's more defined in the report along transit corridors. And like what you did in Hankerson, you know, having these, some didn't like the term buffer, but in a way, these transition or buffer between high density and low density. But they did not see ADUs as a density conversation.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, Carrie, would the process for this be similar to, like I'm thinking like parking, where basically the planning commission or a subcommittee of the planning commission does kind of a study on any one of these and then presents it to the rest of the planning commission, and we kind of all agree or hash it out or, you know, come to some agreement in the verbiage, and then it gets passed on to the city council for ratification and then potential zoning changes. Is that how that works?
It would, yep, a lot of this would be ordinance type work, unless we look at changing some of the densities that are established in the comp plan. So in that respect, it could be a comp plan amendment.
And right now, the way that it's drafted up is really, I think you can even read upside down, it's the 2022 to 2023 work plan, planning commission items. And so I don't think that the ask, obviously, I mean, there's a lot there, right? The ask isn't that we do it all this year. But I think what we're being challenged with is looking at the work plan as we currently have it drafted. Is there capacity for us to add or iterate such that we're integrating some of these items into our work plan? Or if not, because this is always an option, right? Like we're pretty far down the work plan process, being able to say why we're not, and what our approach is to tackling them the following year or whatever. I think is really the ask.
But is there any way to know how, from the HRA's perspective or the council's perspective, their sense of the priority of these items versus what's already? Sorry.
Have they already seen the draft work plan?
No.
No, so they don't know. They wouldn't know where it lands compared to
Right.
other items.
Right.
So I think that would be up for you all to set the priorities.
Okay.
And then present it to them, and they prioritize.
Well, and I know that I kind of kicked us off embedding this question, but maybe it would be good to pause for a moment on these items and say, has staff had any conversations about the work plan as we've drafted it out today and provided any feedback? I don't know if you've spoken with like Scott Neal or if it's been reviewed, not by the council, but by anyone else.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
staff wise, no. I don't see, as it's drafted today, this seems doable. I don't have issues with what it's, as we've got drafted, that we can't accomplish these things. When we start adding things, then now I might start to get concerned. I think maybe we can take on the accessory dwelling units. We can do some research and start to think about that. So I think that could be added without too much tasking of staff. So that's kind of where some of the other ones I think are going to be very time consuming and yeah, it's going to be a political hot buttons. And I think the council, the HRA recognized that when they saw these.
Oh, it's, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think ADUs will be too.
It will. If we present it kind of like what Stephanie was talking about, it doesn't sound quite as daunting as a separate unit building. It depends where we go with it. So yeah, it could be. My first thought was, we're doubling the density in the residential district. But are we really doing that?
No, I'm not saying we are.
Yeah.
There will be a lot of people who perceive it that way.
They will.
Not to say that we shouldn't or should do anything based on that. It's just not going to be as easy as.
Yeah,
I think that there are certain things that people might hear, like we could say you can't make an Airbnb out of it. Right? I mean, it's just,
well, we've got that now.
yeah, so. I think that's what people fear, really. They
Another-
don't fear like.
Another thing that I thought about when considering this is, okay, you're allowing 2 units on a single family lot. So our minimum lot size is 9,000 square feet. Our comp plan allows within that whole district up to 5 units per acre. Well, are we exceeding that now with an ADU? I think that might be a question for Met Council. If we take that on, is this now an amendment to the comp plan? And now to your point, we're increasing density in whatever the percentage is, 80% of Edina. That's gonna,
And then do we stick with our lot coverage?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of things there. It's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Or do that limits,
Yeah.
right? So a ton to unpack.
Mhm.
What are some thoughts
Yeah,
on
be really-
whether we should or can tackle it as a part of our 2022 work plan?
An ADU isn't really a unit, right? It's sort of like half a unit,
well,
if you want to talk about it that way. We just think about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Did we just approve something or we approve it or we just look at on France, where they had that, what do they call it? The one house,
so
and that's a doubling of density and it's
it is, yeah.
compared to the houses that are being built on lots now, it's not using any more of the land than people are doing today, so.
Yep, yeah, that's the question I wanted to ask of Met Council, if we're thinking in this. It's another unit, but if it's within the same structure, is that really? So we'd have to get an official take on that from Met Council.
Do you think so let's just say hypothetically to build the potential plan. If we added ADUs, would we have to take something off?
Not necessarily.
I think that's a question back to us.
Yeah, I don't know enough. I don't have experience to say whether we would or wouldn't.
Yeah, it depends, how far we want to take it. If we get into it, we do the initial research and if you really want to ratchet it up, well, then it might, where we are doubling the density would probably take us into the next year, but that's okay. This we've been working on it.
I don't think any city that's had influence in ADUs has had this rash of doubling.
No,
I mean,
no.
nothing like that.
No.
Right? So we have some experience from that, right, from other cities, even twin cities.
Yeah, and then it's a matter of how you regulate it. I've sat in on national conferences where, you know, they, they require a license. Some cities go as far as a conditional use permit where you're reviewing everyone. That could get pretty busy with those kind of things. Could just be a permitted use, but just would have to be licensed through the health department. And then it's a staffing issue too. How many of those are we taking on? But I think could be manageable.
Joanne, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was, thanks. Just looking at these, I'm just wondering if we could push back to this committee, or Stephanie, are you guys even still together? It seems like,
No, we're not.
maybe that's something you could investigate and present to the planning commission for us to, versus us having to take this on.
I think the
that a
idea is once,
possibility?
when those task forces are created, they do their work, create their document, but then they're done. Then it's pushed off to staff and council and HRA to pick up with their recommendations and decide if they should move forward.
Okay, so, all right. 'Cause I'm just looking at these, the 1 through 8, and a lot of them are already implementing, through our review. And I think what you were talking about with the accessory dwelling units is a big one. But is that, so we're saying that we would have a task force within the planning commission to review this in detail? Or are we saying, we're telling planning commission staff that they have to do the work?
It could be a combination of both. For now, we're just recognizing the issue. This is something we want to study further.
But I do think that if it's on the planning commission's work plan, the idea is that there's at least a few commissioners who are partnering and driving forward the work.
Yeah.
Right. I just, I'm not saying this to not sound like this isn't an important subject. It really is. But I think the Cahill is a priority, the parking. So I guess I'm concerned if we would have the capacity. But those are my thoughts, not to.
Well, then we make parking real simple by just getting rid of it.
Done.
Well, and I do think, there are things in here, the review process, right? Like, I think it's worthwhile for us, even just in the work plan, to make a note of and integrating the feedback from this task force, right? Like, just add that to the item that's already in our work plan for both the review process and for the parking. Because I think with the parking, right, like, we're already gonna kind of be thinking about this. They are intertwined. But even just calling out that, hey, not only did the planning commission want to work on parking, but also we're being asked to think about it through this other work plan too. That could show that we're making some progress. It feels, yeah, we just need to make a decision on, can we handle one more thing? Or if we can't, do we want to take this on and cut something else or not take this on this year?
Just a clarifying question, so I understand it. Stephanie, in this context, missing middle housing, what's a working definition of missing middle housing? Approximately.
It is medium density. So it could be, a triplex that has the same massing as a larger single-family home. Or it could be, like a, what are those, a 12-unit garden style courtyard, smaller development. It's, on the slide, there's a graph that is often used. So it's anything really like between duplexes or duplexes and smaller apartments.
Okay, thanks.
To kind of buffer between like a conventional apartment building and single family. So it's the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this, that Edina really doesn't have much.
Right. And so it pertains to massing and not income.
Yeah, we approved one, I guess it was last summer now, so you wouldn't have been involved in it, but it's just behind the bank over here in Grandview off Hankerson. That's kind of, that was gonna fit this, this missing middle. Not necessarily affordable.
Yeah.
but-
A lot of people think.
They're building those now.
Yeah, that's what I was. Okay, thank you. That's good clarification.
And just look at smaller buildings in Linden Hills.
So aside from the ADU, just to take a, just to park that for just 2 seconds. It does seem like some of this, like the simplified project approval process. It sounds like that's more of a staff issue, right? I mean, how do you see the planning commission getting involved in that? Because it feels like a process thing.
I
That
think
was a
they,
good one for
that,
me.
yeah, it's, what the task force members had heard is that doing sketch plan review before planning commission, and then again for the city council. And then doing public hearings before the, planning commission and then the city council was onerous. And that other cities have adopted, that they go to the planning commission, and if it's appealed, it goes to the city council, but the city council doesn't reinvent the process from the planning commission. And they had heard from developers that worked elsewhere when they did their interviewing that Edina just has additional layers of review.
So it seems like. I mean, is that kind of just a decision? Like, do we need to make that more complicated than just, we're gonna change the process?
Would it be the planning commission proposing to city council that they back off?
I don't know where they're really looking, they're looking to streamline the whole process, you know, whether it's
Yeah.
the planning commission.
I mean,
All the
maybe
way
that's,
through. From a staff perspective, we just did this, what, 7, 8 years ago, where we did somewhat streamline the process. We used to have 4 public hearings. So. Yeah, could it be better? Yeah, and maybe, but I think we're kind of looking at that.
Yeah, that's initiative number 3, which, I
yeah,
mean, to your kind of earlier discussion too, of like, what is the accessory dwelling? Like, what is that from a work?
yeah,
I think that this initiative number 3 hopefully can be relatively simple.
yeah,
It's just gonna be, hey, here's what the new draft process could look like, and then joining
yeah,
Mayor Hovland on one of his walks and pitching it to him,
right,
or maybe something more formal, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I think that one is gonna be a lighter lift.
yeah,
But I still think it's worth calling out on our work plan.
just to make sure it gets done.
Yeah, and because then it's also telling the city council approves our work plan. And so it's kind of floating the idea to them of like, hey, there's reasons behind why we're doing this.
Yeah,
And if they approve it to be on there, then they won't be surprised with.
yeah, that's, yeah, that's,
Yeah, I like that. So we can put a reference
yeah,
right in here that this also comes from here.
that's good thinking.
And 7 and 8 are really the same thing, 2 sides of the same coin.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And considering that, I mean, if that is really, I mean, we can always be flexible, right? I mean, if it gets pushed off another year, it gets pushed off another year, but you know, if it is a lighter lift, then we'd have more capacity for something like ADUs. And
And I'd be happy to like even just kind of own that one. Like I don't bring it back, but I don't think
Yeah.
that there's too much to do, so.
you mean the process or the ADU?
The number 3, the review sketch plan process.
On the work planning?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. And yeah, and the ADU is different from the missing middle, but will have some of the same. Actually, it will be, it needs to be presented differently though, doesn't it? A separate, yeah.
It's not to say missing middle isn't possible under existing zoning,
Yeah.
an existing comp plan.
Yeah. Yeah, because we are putting more missing middle.
Yeah. Because I mean, we've got medium density areas where those things can fit. Do you think they want to target single family areas and allow them there?
I don't know if they want it to be more formalized, because even Hankerson was a long, challenging process for all of you, for both the planning commission and the city council. And so I don't know if it's more daylighted, but this complies with what you said we wanted, and so it's not as challenging when it comes up. I
Yeah,
think that's it, and forgive me for saying this as an example, sensitive to the fact this is YouTubed. If some duplexes in areas where there's rows of duplexes, if someone were to acquire a few in a row, and want to do a row attached townhomes, would that be a huge lift if that defined as missing middle on these transit corridors, since they're now duplexes? If they became like a big multiple sets of fourplexes, would that be acceptable under your current zoning and qualify as missing middle, or would that just be a political cocktail?
So this is Ian. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Sorry, I've had a lot of problems today, but thank you. So on this particular item, based on lessons learned, missing middle we're talking about, I would suggest that that's something that if I had if I could wave a wand and assign it, I would assign it to the economic development team within the staff at Edina. And the reason for that is just the lessons learned from the Grandview project, where someone came in and tried to build missing middle, and for a variety of reasons, including but not limited to the fact that land costs are so expensive in Edina, it makes it very hard to build missing middle. Plus, I would start there and just see, how can missing middle can even be built in an economic manner within Edina. Before you figure out where you're going to put it, you have to figure out how it could be built. That's just my 2 cents. And maybe that's something the planning commission could do as part of the study. But I think you'd have to start there, is where it could even be built before we decide where we want it or how it could be built.
And I don't disagree with you, because it has been challenging and has been brought up. The economics are really challenging with it. I'm wondering if you said it's already allowed, if it's just even pointing out on a land use map where it's allowed.
yeah.
And, outlining those areas and saying it's allowed in these areas. So from a land use, I think it's put to planning commission from a land use perspective.
Yep, so there would be areas where it would be allowed. And then I go back to the Hankerson, and even the example that you were giving about the duplexes and increasing the density a little bit. We've got language in the comprehensive plan that talks about promoting missing middle. And that, I think, helped the council ultimately approve that Hankerson project, because it is a land use that we're trying to achieve. So in a way, again, we've got things in place where we're already addressing it.
This is Ian again. The other thing on missing middle, not only are we trying to achieve it, and maybe that's our objective, but over the last 20 years, I think there's been a policy to actually reduce it. And maybe that's not been a formal policy, but I think anyone looking at what's happened, and there are good or bad reasons for what's happened, particularly in single family housing. But I think we have to recognize that our practices to date and ongoing currently support the elimination of missing middle housing. Just my 2
I'm
cents.
not sure if I understand why you say that.
Because I would say that over the last 20 years, I don't know, the numbers are probably large, but my guess is, somewhere between 200 and 500 houses that could be, that could qualify as missing middle type economic houses have been torn down and replaced with houses that are luxury houses.
I think you're thinking of missing middle from an economic perspective versus, sharing walls.
Yeah, we're
But
talking
it-
about missing middle with regards to massing and not income.
And was that the goal of the housing group, or what?
Yes. It's about
Matt,
massing.
then go back to Carrie's thing, but okay. But then you also have to recognize that the missing middle, that again, based on experience, when those types of massings get presented, they get pushed to be luxury housing, or to be expensive houses, and that's so
Yeah.
that's fine. We can mass these things anywhere we want, but I don't think the people are sitting around saying we're harming the community by the massing of our houses. I mean, now there are some advantages to that kind of massing, which will happen, and from the environmental standpoint. But in terms of housing scarcity, whether the expensive houses are sharing walls or not, we still have the same social issue.
Yeah, it doesn't address the affordable housing. Necessarily. I always think of the, Noonan's development on like 52nd in France, the townhouses, right?
Yep.
Which sell for close to 2 million each. But it shows that people will buy those.
Yeah.
Do you recall what was there before, and was that an issue when that became?
The parking lot of the church was
Oh,
extended all the way.
yeah, so it was a big parking lot.
Well, that's a better use.
Yeah, that's. Was there objection from the neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
both ways.
Yeah.
Right, and how wonderful is that, right? I mean, that's pretty nice.
That's an upgrade from a parking lot. And even if you were really aiming for affordable, that doesn't check that box, but it checks environmental.
And it checks the almost like aging in place of people not having to shovel and whatnot. So
Yeah.
I do think that those tend to be owned more by
Yeah,
an older population.
right,
That was appropriate for France Avenue.
right. They look great.
I do recall when it was proposed that a single dwelling unit neighborhood was concerned because there's this perception that there's going to be this France Avenue creep of, more density, commercial, whatever.
Yeah,
So there was a lot of concern.
yeah.
So we have 13 minutes left, depending on time. Do we want to add this? Do we want to try and at least frame it up almost like as I think however you worded it, Sheila, of like start to research
Yeah.
and
Like
evaluate.
kind of explore.
Yeah,
Because, worst case, then it gets everybody comfortable with the fact that this is gonna be discussed, right? And maybe we finish it, and if we don't finish it, it rolls over to the next year.
We're back to the ADUs.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, right?
It makes sense to me, I don't know if everybody else thinks.
Yep, I agree.
I like that, leading with it's a kind of a research project to start with.
Yeah, because I don't think that
That's
we
really what it
start,
be,
that we
yeah.
know,
Yeah,
like, is it an ordinance? Like, what is it that we're actually gonna be doing? And
yeah. Cause there are some uncertainties, in Minneapolis, I don't know, like, do they restrict it to a certain size? Do they restrict it to a certain, lot area coverage? And then, of course, in Minneapolis, you can do Airbnb and all that kind of stuff in there, right?
So Minnetonka's revising their rules on ADUs right now, because they used to have to be attached.
Mm.
And now they're allowing, like over garages and detached.
Yeah.
So they're shifting away from attached to
Yeah.
detached. And I think that's happened in other communities as well, where they started out as having to be attached, and now they're allowing above garages and.
Yeah.
I
If
assume
those
ours,
garages are detached, sorry.
I'm assuming ours would be different from Minneapolis in that, and typically in cities, these are, alley houses or whatever. They
Yeah,
already have alleys in most of them,
yeah,
actually none, so I think we have to think about it. differently.
yeah, because parking on the street and,
Parking will be an issue.
yeah, additional cars. I could think, so.
Yeah, and for Minnetonka, their minimum lot size is a half acre. We're at 22,000 square feet, where ours is 9,000. So
Really?
they've got
In
more.
order to have an ADU or in general?
In general, that's their minimum lot size. There's a lot more room there.
I did not realize that.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to all the different, yeah. Okay.
So Carrie, from that, do you think you have enough to at least put an initial text together?
Yep.
Okay.
I do. So we'll add some text to initiative 3 and add ADUs to 4 and some more text behind that.
And then can we also add a reference in initiative number 5, which is the public and private parking continuation of off-street parking, blah, 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 blah. Because there was one in here, I don't think you mentioned it, but wasn't there something that was related to parking? Or did I make that up?
I've seen that in the climate action plan recommendations. I think Lou might have had something to do with that one, but I don't
I
remember.
recall that too as part of, but it may have been part, I'm recalling part of the discussion.
So it falls under goal number 2, amend land use regulations to enable a more diverse housing stock. And then, number 5 as a subsection of that says, the planning allow for creative solutions and some flexibility in the provision of off-street parking standards for housing. This might look like options like shared parking, reduced parking minimums near transit and activity nodes, and were exceptions to structured parking requirements for affordable housing. And then the staff response below that was the planning commission is currently considering an ordinance amendment to the city's parking standards. But because we're considering that and because it's now in this report, I think it might just add more flavor to, hey, this is also connected.
Yeah, and that wasn't on the slide because it was in the in process section.
Okay,
But
I read it. No, I just did control find for parking and saw that there are 26 references to parking, so.
Hey, Carrie. This might be an appropriate time to bring this up. So, we're gonna talk about, the, eliminating the maximum 1 foot increase, whatever, however you want to say it.
Yep.
And you circulated the letter, which I thought was interesting and gave a perspective I hadn't thought about. So, is there a point where we can talk about that and you can give us your opinion about that and whether we do it now or maybe it's more appropriate now?
Yeah, I was planning to mention it tonight, but we can,
Yeah. Oh, you mean you're gonna mention that in the meeting?
yeah.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure that,
I do have some,
because I hadn't really thought about that, but I
yeah,
think it's worthy of discussion.
yep, agreed.
Okay. Okay, so we'll talk about that in the meeting.
Yep, unless you want to talk about it now.
Let's hold it for the meeting, just because then we'll have everyone there,
Yeah,
so you don't have to repeat yourself.
perfect.
Okay. Anything else? All right, well, thank
I
you.
think we're good.
Thank you.
We will chat again in 37 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian and Julian.
Thank you.
Is Julian